tas ir solis, ko speram, trauksmes celšanas sistēma, lai trauksmes celšanas sistēma kļūtu vēl, cerams, efektīvāk, uzticamāk un cilvēkam tuvāk. Cienījamie kolēģi, konferences dalībnieki. Pastāvēs tas, kas mainīsies. Ziņošanas kultūra ir dzīves process, kas attīstās kopā ar sabiedrību. Mēs esam šeit, lai pārrunātu aktuālo situāciju, identificētu izaicinājumus un vienotos, ka trauksmes celšanas sistēma var kļūt vēl stiprāk. Lai katrs, kurš redz netaisnību vai pārkāpumu, justos droši, pārliecināti, zinot, ka viņa rīcība ir nozīmīga un ka viņam ir valsts atbalsts. Es ticu, ka kopīgiem spēkiem ar Delnas nevalstisko organizāciju publiskā un privātā sektora iesaisti mēs varam panākt, ka ziņot kļūst par normu, nevis izņēmumu. Ka godīgums nevis prasība, bet vērtība, ar kuru lepojamies. Paldies jums visiem par darbu, par drosmi, par ticību tam, ka godīgums joprojām ir vērtība, par kuru vērts iestāties. Un visbeidzot, paldies, ka esat šodien šeit, lai stiprinātu to, kas mūsu valstī ir visvairāk nepieciešams. Godīgums, drosme un atbildība. Un lai auglīgas diskusijas šodien. Paldies!
Liels paldies Jēkabas Traumes kungam par šo uzrunu un pilnīgi piekrītu šiem vārdiem, kad mēs esam šeit, lai pārrunātu par to, kādai šai trauksmes celšanas sistēmai turpmākajos gados attīstīties, kādā virzienā un tai vērtībai, lai šī sistēma attīstītos, pa galvenai vērtībai ir jābūt cilvēkam, lai viņš justos droši ziņot un arī sabiedrībai no tā arī būtu labums. Tad šis ir tās divas vērtības, uz kurām tad pilnveidojot sistēmu mums būtu jātiecas. Vēl es arī vēlos uzsvērt, ka šī ir starptautiska konference, kas šodien pulsē pārstāvis no 9 valstīm, no Latvijas, no Lietuvas, no Lielbritānijas, no Slovākijas, no Serbijas un no Ukrainas. Un mums arī pārstāvis no Eiropas komisijas un arī no Vācijas. Līdz ar to konference tiešām pulcē ļoti plašu ekspertu loku no ļoti dažādām valstīm, kurās trauksmes celšanas regulējums ir, vai arī tas top. Un šodien būs tā iespēja dzirdēt, kā citām valstīm veicas ar sistēmas ieviešanu un iedvesmoties vienam no otra. Bet šo konferenci es gribētu atklāt ar prezentāciju no Ukrainas, un es aicināšu Natāliju Sičevļuku no Transparency International Ukrainas nodaļas, kura tur ir juridiskā konsultante, dalīties savā pieredzē par trauksmes celšanu kara apstākļos. So, I would like to open this conference with the first presentation from Ukraine, asking Ms. Natalia Sičevļika from Transparency International Ukraine chapter to join and give a presentation how they are doing implementing whistleblowing law and how it's regulated.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I believe this will help me change the slides, right? Yeah? Yeah? Okay. So, like Agnia said, I'm going to share with you Ukraine experience in whistleblowing protection during the wartime. So we're gonna focus on our main challenges and successful cases as well. Okay. Yeah, it's gonna, okay. Before diving in a little history of Ukraine anti-corruption achievements, in the last 10 years we've been able to, through the joint efforts of authorities and civil society, Ukraine has built a robust anti-corruption architecture. We have successfully created a complete anti-corruption infrastructure, adopted crucial legislation, and reformed public procurement through innovative tools like Prozoro platform. However, Russia's full-scale invasion was a total shock for us, but we continue to do our reforms, especially those that are crucial for our EU integration. The conceptual foundation for whistleblower protection was laid years ago. For instance, in 2016, we had a draft law number 4038A, which was aimed to establish comprehensive protection mechanism based on the best global practices. Its goal was to protect not just public servants, but virtually all individuals who inform on crucial information. However, this bill was never adopted. Also, as you can see on the slide, in 2015, the National Agency on Corruption Prevention was established, which was supposed to guarantee whistleblowers protection, but due to corrupted management and other internal problems, NACP work was extremely ineffective till it was rebooted in 2020. Now, let me quickly define who a whistleblower is and how they operate under Ukrainian law. A whistleblower is a physical person who has a reasonable belief that the information they disclose is reliable. This information must concern harm or a threat to public interest, and it must have become known to them in connection with their professional, educational, or official duties. Ukrainian legislation, same as EU directive stipulates, provides three primary channels for reporting corruption. Those are internal channel, regular channel, and external channel. Basically, I think it's understandable which one stands for what. Internal channels, those are for reporting inside the organization. Regular channels, those are channels for reporting to state bodies responsible for corruption prevention and enforcement. Like in Ukraine, we have, I've already mentioned, NACP, National Agency for Corruption Prevention, NABU, National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine, the Prosecutor's Office, and the National Police. And external channels is going to media or NGOs. After 2020 reboot of NACP, a series of legislation changes were made to expand the range of whistleblowers protection. This included protection of the whistleblower's close relatives, the right to choose among the reporting channels without requiring from whistleblower to follow a specific sequence, exemption from legal liability for disclosure of information except deliberately false information, and application of the presumption of employer's guilt. This means that it's up to the employer to prove that there is no link between the reporting of corruption and dismissal of the employee who reported it. However, certain legislation gaps and challenges remains to this day, which is the first and the most crucial one, limited scope of protection. Current Ukrainian legislation grants whistleblower status and protection guarantees exclusively to persons who report corruption or corruption-related offenses. This is especially detrimental in the wartime. Conflict in acquiring whistleblower status. According to international standards, whistleblower status and guarantees should be granted from the moment of reporting, but according to some of NACP's interpretation, it links whistleblower status to the fact of reporting verification or entry of information into the Unified Register of Pre-Trial Investigation. This narrows protection guarantees. The star of the show in Ukraine right now is the Unified Whistleblower Reporting Portal. It was launched in September 2023, and the portal is the main internal channel for reports and functions as a secure information and telecommunication system where all reports are recorded. So basically, all organizations should join this portal in order for their employees to be able to report. And a little bit of statistic on how many reports NACP receives. So we can see that as of the end of October 2025, the total number of reports received by NACP through Unified Whistleblower Reporting Portal is almost 8,000 reports. Reports that's been reviewed is a bit more than half of all the received reports, but the reports which was identified as whistleblower reports is only 163 reports. This shows that only a small percentage of all received reports actually meet the legal requirement for the verification as whistleblower reports, which indicates the additional need for educational work, legal system and current portal shortcomings as well. Which are? First one is that currently in this portal there is no personal whistleblower cabinet. This missing feature severely restricts the whistleblower's ability to stay connected with the authorized person, provide follow-up evidence, or receive prompt updates on the investigation status. Second one is that the portal currently demands the whistleblower provide the legal qualification of the offense. This is extremely burdensome for non-lawyer whistleblowers. As we know, the legal qualification should be done on the stage of reporting to law enforcement bodies. And the last but the most crucial one is the confidentiality risk that's currently could be in the portal, is that the organization managers may have access to all reviewed reports through the archive section. This possesses a direct threat to confidentiality, especially if the report concerns senior management. To maximize the portal's potential, these functional issues must be addressed immediately, often requiring selection of specialized contractors and adherence to international standards like ICO 37002 and GDPR. Now, a bit of our statistic on Ukrainians' perception of corruption and whistleblowers. The need to finish reforms in the whistleblowers protection system synchronized with Ukrainians' perception of corruption and whistleblowers. This is this year's statistic. As we can see, about 30% of Ukrainians encountered corruption, and among those 30%, 61% refused but did not report the incident, while only 7% refused and reported the incident. Same goes for the NACP's statistics last year. We can see that public opinion strongly supports whistleblowers. In 2024, support for whistleblowers among Ukrainians reached 74.3%, marking 3%, marking a historical maximum for our country, compared to 67.3% in 2023. Support from Ukrainian business is consistently high. It is over 85%. So we can see that there is a big gap between willingness and action. And although a high proportion of citizens and businesses express willingness to report corruption, only 9.7% of citizens and 17.2% of business representatives actually do so. Those are the statistics from NACP from last year. So what could be the reason for that in Ukraine right now? The first one is obviously stigmatization and fear. These processes are rooted in the totalitarian past of our country, which remains a barrier to exposing corruption to these days. People fear revenge, persecution, both legal and financial, and social condemnation as well. And also, the other reason for that is the lack of knowledge about reporting procedures and protection guarantees. This is one of the main reasons for silencing corruption. Basically, people don't know that there are a good system, a law framework to protect them. Additional problems for military personnel, which we discovered after the full-scale invasion. A significant and alarming gap remains in creating safe channels for military personnel, especially those serving on the front line. The central issue here is the current legal ambiguity surrounding the disclosure of state or intelligence secrets. If corruption information happens to be classified according to our criminal code, the person could be prosecuted. Experts recommend urgent changes to criminal code to exempt whistleblowers who report socially important classified information. And also, currently military personnel cannot report through any channels except directly to their commander, which is also very detrimental in the wartime conditions. Now about the incentives. Currently in Ukraine, a major factor for whistleblowing is the reward mechanism. It was established in 2019, but only started working recently, about 2 years ago, because of all the procedures that needed to be done in order for the payment to actually happen. And right now, a whistleblower is entitled to receive 10% of the monetary value of the subject of the corruption crime or damages caused to the state by the crime. This incentive system aligns with the new model, which is the international standard, where the value of the information prevails over the informer's motivation. And we've already had 2 big cases. The first one, they happened last year. The first one is a case with Andriy Boyko, who received his reward on October 4, 2024. He is a former director of the Internal Audit Department of the Ministry of Defense. And he received the payment of 1.768 million Ukrainian hryvnias, approximately 37,000 euros. And the second payment happened on October 18, 2024. Yevhen Shevchenko received nearly 13.3 million Ukrainian hryvnias, which is approximately 300,000 euros. And this case concerned an attempted bribery of NABU and SAPO head. NABU and SAPO, those are law enforcement, specialized law enforcement for combating corruption in Ukraine. The person, the former Ministry of Ecology, tried to bribe them in order to close criminal proceedings against him. Notably, the entire amount of the unlawful benefit was transferred to the needs of the armed forces on Ukraine by the decision of the High Anti-Corruption Court. These 2 cases, however, are controversial in our opinion, because both Andriy Boyko and Yevhen Shevchenko were engaged in confidential cooperation with NABU under criminal procedure rules. So whistleblower protection and engagement in confidential cooperation, in our opinion, these are different legal concepts with varying rights and regime. However, Ukrainian legislation still have gaps and allows it to overlap. Right now, work is ongoing to harmonize this framework. The bill was registered to harmonize those. And the other case, which was really big on media, Oleg Polishchuk case, this is a good representation of all the difficulty a whistleblower can face in Ukraine right now. Oleg Polishchuk was a director for prevention and counteraction of corruption and the big state enterprise Energoatom. When he informed about the corruption in his company, he was unlawfully fired and mistakenly included on a list of corrupt officials. The irony is painful. However, he was able to reach a court settlement regarding compensation payment and reinstatement. So this story demonstrates a successful alternative path to financial recovery and protection against employer reprisal through court. And ACP was a third party in this case, and it was extremely helpful. Oleg Polishchuk thanked them a lot in his interviews and in media overall. So, key conclusions. Ukrainian achievements include establishing and rebooting the NACP as a central body responsible for whistleblower protection. After its reboot, it actually worked very efficiently towards making a good protection system for whistleblowers, and it's been only 5 years. Launching the unified whistleblower reporting portal, for sure, and also implementing crucial legal guarantees, such as protection against persecution and the presumption of the employer's guilt in the case of dismissal. However, significant challenges remain, which must be addressed immediately. Those are the legislative gaps. We must urgently amend existing law to provide protection for whistleblowers, particularly military personnel who disclose classified information. We also should maximize the portal potential by implementing critical technical improvements, such as the personal cabinet and ensuring absolute confidentiality through security protocols. And obviously, bridging the gap. Despite the high public support, which is 74.3% in 2024, we need effective communication strategies to build trust and bridge the gap between the public support and the actual willingness to report corruption. That would be all from me. Thank you so much. If we have time, I think I can take a few questions or... Okay.
I see that we have time and we can open the answer and questions and answer session. So if you have just questions, just raise a hand. We will give you a microphone, but maybe first question can come also from my side because I would like to use this opportunity. Maybe you could describe one more time how you do this value of the money for this reward you are giving to the whistleblower, because you was mentioning that 10% of the something. How you doing this evaluation of this? How much will be in money, and also who is paying? Like which institution is paying? It comes from the state budget or from the budget of the institution, or maybe you can describe more.
Yeah, it comes from a state budget right now, which is not ideal, as we believe that you have to put some number in the state budget, and that would be the cap for the possible reward system, and there should be no cap whatsoever for reward system. You cannot count how many cases will happen in a year that's gonna come. So it's not ideal right now, but it's the work is going to change that. And regarding how do we calculate the exact number? Basically, it's the number of the bribe that was that.
It's, for example, I just gave a bribe 10 euros and my award will be €1.
Yes, okay. Exactly. But there are some ambiguity in the law as well, because you could calculate it from the amount of bribe, but you also could calculate it from the amount of the damages that could be done to the state, which can be different according to our high anti-corruption court decisions. Yeah, so there is ambiguity in there, and it also should be changed, to my opinion. Right now, there's only been those two cases when they calculated the number for the amount of reward from the proposed bribery. So there, like you said, 10 euros, it means you get €1. Yeah, so that's how it's happening right now.
Okay, thank you very much. And maybe you can describe more in statistics after these cases when the reward was made to that person. Did it increase whistleblowing number of whistleblowing reports, or?
Yes, of course. Like I said, we did statistics from 2023, and NACP also did the same one. And we see that after those two cases, when the reward was granted, the support for whistleblowers increased rapidly by 10%, which is the historical maximum. But during our panel discussion, I think we could discuss more about the reward system and how it can be tricky somewhat. It should not be the only motivation for whistleblowing, for sure. That's why the last point in our key challenges is to make a cultural shift towards respecting whistleblowers. Yeah.
Good morning. My name's Georgina Halford-Hall. I'm from Whistleblowers UK. Great admiration for the work that you've done, particularly during a war. We are in the UK working on a similar system, and we're not getting there as quickly as we should. So a question I'm always asked, I'm going to put to you. What was the cost of setting up the whistleblowing office for Ukraine, and how are you judging success?
Oh, that's a great question. What is the cost? You know, I cannot not mention our soldiers.
yeah, basically everything that's going on in our country is possible because of the people who protect us. And yeah, a lot of employers from my organization, from NACP as well, and other bodies who involved in the protection of whistleblowers, they were mobilized into Ukrainian forces, armed forces, which is already a big payment to my as I see it. But the big motivation for going forward is the openness of negotiation with EU right now. And yeah, what really helps, we have roadmaps now. We have reports on enlargement reports, which actually was published a couple of days ago. Yesterday I was analyzing it, so yeah. It also says that Ukraine is doing good in that department of whistleblower protection, but unfortunately not many reports of from whistleblower actually ends up as the conviction or actual case in the court. And but I believe the main reason and the main motivation for Ukrainians to go forward is trying to be a part of European Union, and we really don't want this future for ourselves right now. And so, yeah. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Vladimir Radomirovic. I'm from Serbia. I'm a journalist and a former whistleblower. I first of all want to congratulate you on everything that you do.
Thank you.
I noticed that Ukrainian, there's a special word for whistleblower. You did not just translate the English.
Yes. Yes. And, correct.
So my question is, how has this term helped in getting the public support, meaning that you have a local word, not a loan from English, and also because we have a word in Serbian for whistleblower, we don't use the English term. And another question is, when do you expect the law to be expanded to cover not just corruption, but other forms of crime?
Yeah, we have, I'm going to start from the last part, which is we've already had a couple of registered bills on the expansion of the term of whistleblower, so it would cover not only persons who inform on corruption or corruption-related offenses, but on all crucial public information. We hope it will be adopted like this year, maybe next year, but the deadline for us, which is stated in our roadmap with EU, is the end of 2027, I believe. So it's already documented. We have no other choice there, luckily, thankfully. And the second question about the term, that Ukrainians really crafted its own word for whistleblowers. Or basically, викривач, it came from відкривати, which is opening. So yeah, it's very symbolic. And actually, I think it is intuitively more resonating more with Ukrainians than any, adopted word from English. So it's been working, I think, good for motivating people and for people to support those who actually will to inform on corruption and even go public sometimes. For example, like in case of Oleg Polishuk, he is the most famous викривач in Ukraine. And media actually helped him get justice. So, if I answered your question, thank you.
Maybe one more question.
Skarita, I'm a member of parliament. Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm happy to hear that because in my professional life previously I have worked a lot in Ukraine. with regard to competition issues. My question is, actually it was a surprise for me that you have also such financial motivation, but what kind of legal support or psychological support, mentoring did you provide? Because those cases were very huge, very dangerous for both whistleblowers. Yeah, could you elaborate a little bit about that?
Yes, thank you for the question. Sure, our law does provide mandatory law aid and psychological aid. However, there is a question of quality of those aids because, yeah, like you mentioned, after the full-scale invasion, it's just basically very stressful just to be in Ukraine, and not mentioning to report on any corruption. So yeah, we've had this idea, which would be great, I think, for Ukraine to implement regarding the psychological aid, is that a voucher system. So a person could choose a psychologist and not like get the one that is, you know, granted by state, but to find the one that he would be comfortable with and confident that this person is competent enough. And regarding the legal aid, yeah, also we do have the free legal aid system, and it's also stipulated in law. But again, the question of quality, there's only as much hours of pro bono work that lawyers can do, and whistleblowers cases are very difficult. So, for example, in case of Oleg Polishuk, you're gonna hear this name from me a lot today. His lawyers got paid after they won the court cases. There were 3 court cases, and after he was granted the reimbursement for his struggle, the lawyers got paid. This is a great alternative, for example, for free legal aid, but again, if a lawyer agrees to these terms right now. Yes, so there's also work to be done in that department as well. Yeah. Thank you.
I think there is one more question.
Yes, hello. I'm Ines Kushti from the State's Chancellery. And I wanted to ask you to elaborate on another interesting thing you have in Ukraine, which is this third-party representation by the NACP.
Yes.
Maybe you can describe how it works in retaliation court cases. What is the role of the institution in protecting the person? Thank you.
Yeah, so basically the third, being the third person in our system means that you cannot be the plaintiff, you cannot submit the is this the correct word? I forgot. Yeah, okay, anyway. But so the whistleblower has to be represented by lawyers or no, only lawyers, yeah, right, advocates. And NACP helps with the complexity of legal terms. It can provide some clarification, some documents, some kind of regulation, even, and also it can issue the mandatory act for the employer to reinstate the person on his or her positions, and that if the employer will not do that, NACP can also go to court with this. But in case of Oleg Polishuk, he mentioned that it was so difficult to actually just navigate through all the laws and regulations that NACP helped him immensely with that in the court proceeding and before, because it, yeah, like I said, they issued the mandatory document for the employer to do the disciplinary investigation, inner investigation. Unfortunately, after that investigation, Oleg was dismissed. Yeah, but NACP was supporting Oleg Polishuk from the start till the end of this story, which was approximately 2 years. So yeah, it's basically it helps navigate through all the regulations and laws in the court proceedings. Thanks.
I think thanks you very much for your contribution today to this conference, is your presentation, and also thanks you very much about all what you are doing in your country is a whistleblowing field. I see that we can learn from you, especially knowing in which conditions you are working. I think it's very, very just appreciated what you are doing, and I
Thank you, Agnia.
one more time thanks you for your presentation, and I. And now I would like to invite you for the 20 minutes coffee break, because we need some time to do some practicalities for the next discussion. So the coffee break is the same room, the morning coffee was.
trading jackets like we used to do. Everything is all reused. I know you get deja vu. I know you get deja beyond every name, beyond everybody before you or I were known, beyond every measure, beyond every name, beyond everybody before you or I were known. Before the why, before the how, beyond the needs, beyond the vows, it's love. It's love. It's love. Beyond every measure, beyond every name, beyond everybody before you or I were known. Before the why, before the how, beyond the needs, beyond the vow. My favorite song is dancing and wouldn't be a bad
Aicini visus atpakaļ. Aicini visus atpakaļ. Jā, aicini. Labdien, es aicinu visus atpakaļ no kafijas pauzes pievienoties uz mūsu konferences turpinājumu. Dear guests, I would like to ask you to come back from our coffee break because we are starting our conference is a panel discussion. I see that you are still engaged in a very lively discussions, but I would like to start with a panel discussion because after the presentation from the Ukraine, I would like to give a word to Madara Melnikova, who is researcher from the European University Institute and who is in Italy, but originally she is Latvian. And I would like to ask her to open panel discussion about what is the cost of the whistleblower's courage, because we understand that whistleblower should be like hero, what blows the whistle about important issues in society, but we need to understand what it means and what's cost of his courage. And for that, I would like to invite Ms. Madara Melnikova, the moderator of the panel discussion, to start it and introduce her speakers.
Thank you very much. I would like to start with a quote from a whistleblower. The sad truth is that societies that demand whistleblowers be martyrs often find themselves without either, and always when it matters the most. That was said by Edward Snowden. And indeed, when we often think about what whistleblowers experience, we think about court cases, retaliation. Sometimes also courts are being used to silence the whistleblowers and to create chilling effect. But we must look deeper. We must not forget that whistleblowers are human beings which also experience psychological suffering. Oftentimes it has been stated that the families of whistleblowers are also on the verge of destruction exactly during the process of whistleblowing and after that. We also have to look at the process holistically. This psychological distress is not only after the whistleblowing has taken place, but also before that, when the whistleblowers must make the hard moral decision whether or not to speak up. And our role as policymakers, as academics, is to help them to make this decision and to ease the procedure as much as it is possible. So for this reason, today we have three excellent speakers. You already met Natalia, who is the legal advisor at Transparency International Ukraine, and will tell us more about how the system is built in Ukraine and how it will develop through the next years. We have James Killen, who is the head of policy and research at Whistleblowers UK, and also a PhD researcher looking at institutional and organizational practices. And we also have Marie Terakol, who is the head of whistleblower protection of Transparency International, and can tell us more about the whistleblowing practices in different European states, and especially the protection of the most vulnerable groups. So we will start with a more general question. Could you please tell us what, in your opinion, are the most important reasons and the strongest deterrents for whistleblowers? And could you maybe start with James?
Thank you very much. In the UK, the strongest drivers really are moral drivers. We don't have a comprehensive reward systems like they did in the States, or like we've heard about here so far today. So we find a lot in healthcare. You have doctors who have moral obligations to their patients who see wrongdoing going on, and they come forward and they blow the whistle for those sorts of reasons. The biggest problem we have with that, without having a reward system in place, without having a more comprehensive whistleblower protection framework, our laws are 25 years old in this regard, is that we have a huge problem with what we call the bystander effect. So you see somebody being retaliated against, and you yourself want to blow the whistle, but you know you can't because you've seen what happens to somebody else. So for us, whistleblowing is less about the money, it's more about what happens when somebody does blow the whistle, the detriments from that.
Mary, in your research, you have experienced quite a lot of intersectionality, namely exactly the whistleblowers which represent the most marginalized groups. Could you please tell more about their reasonings to come forward, especially knowing that they might experience even more retaliation, which then might have a ripple effect also on other members of their circles?
Yes, thank you. Like on Friday we published a paper on like how gender and other intersectionality affect whistleblowing. So like I'm talking a bit about that.
I mean, what we find is that generally speaking, like the ethical and moral reasons are quite strong, and they're even stronger in women. But at the same time, it doesn't always translate into reporting. So there is like this gap there. So it's not sufficient in a way to have this this motivation. And what we found is that one of the other criteria is obviously protection. Because if they feel that there is not going to be strong protection, they will not come forward. And I can talk a bit more about how like retaliation might differ for women and the impact later. And the other aspect is more like the institutional and cultural context, and how they might feel that how the institution will receive their report, if they will do anything with it, and if it's the kind of topic that the institution takes seriously and I will move forward. So for example, usually they will be driven by the severity of the wrongdoing and the perceived severity of the harm. But when it comes to issues like sexual harassment, they usually will stay silent, even though it is considered like a serious issue and should be considered that way.
So it is exactly more about the specific harm which has been pursued and less considerations about women taking care of the families or the specific types of harassment, which then could also take gender-related note.
Oh yeah, that's definitely comes into play. So when it comes to the type of retaliation, I mean, what we found, like there is some studies that found that usually women face more what we can call soft forms of retaliation. So they're not necessarily being dismissed, which is quite clear and obvious, but it's more around harassment, ostracization, like really trying to denigrate their voice, to make them, like usually when we have this issue of like, oh, but they're being just emotional, irrational. So there is really like this, and that's where like psychological pressure comes in and like might be a real problem. And of course, in many cases, they also, when they're a single mother, they will be the sole money provider for the household, and they're also usually in charge of caring for children and caring for families. So if you don't provide then the necessary support and adapted support, then it doesn't work. But I think we talk about supports a bit later.
Natalia, during your presentation, you also mentioned that 75% of Ukrainians support whistleblowers. On the other hand, one of the reasons for not whistleblowing is exactly the societal stigma, which comes from the hardships of the past of Ukraine. So how do those two things come together? Isn't there a discrepancy? And is there any other reason encouraging whistleblowers or preventing them from whistleblowing in Ukraine, apart from the ones which you mentioned?
Yes, thank you. So yeah, as I mentioned, there is a big, like giant gap between supporting whistleblowers and actually willing to report on corruption. I believe that the main reason that there is still some stigmatization among Ukrainians, like you mentioned, our past, like, you know, the denunciations and all the others terrible Soviet things, but because of the wartime conditions, people get more intolerance with corruption, so they start to support whistleblowers because it's not the matter of the loyalty, or it's not the matter of you know, our just European future. It's a matter of life and death for us right now. It's a matter of for defense, and yeah, especially military personnel. They are some of them are public figures who actually they call for action among Ukrainians to be supportive, to pay attention to anti-corruption initiatives. And so after a few of big scandals regarding military sector, yeah, there was a big shift among Ukrainians toward supporting whistleblowers in 2023, like I mentioned. And in 2024, as I said it, and you also mentioned that it's a historical maximum, and you can say that it is due to the that we still hear of scandals, but it doesn't indicate that Ukraine is extremely corrupt. It mostly indicates that we're actually fighting it, and we're making those cases public because they are being investigated and people are being brought to justice. And the other is, yeah, of course, the cases that I mentioned, the successful cases of rewards, financial rewards. For sure, it's a motivation for Ukrainians right now. We have a giant debt in our budget, you know, and public servants do not right now can receive a fair salaries. So yeah, of course, but also the story of Oleg Polishuk, who went through hell in court. He actually, he appealed to the all three courts and ended up in the cassation court, and he won, but he reached the agreement, court agreement with his employers. So that's the story which also inspired a lot of Ukrainians, as we can see in our statistics. But what are the main reasons to still not willing to act, but being supportive for whistleblowers is the lack of knowledge, for sure, because not all of public servants even know that they have the protection system in place that could protect them in case if they want to report corruption, unfortunately. What should be done is, of course, the educational strategies, information strategies, and the unit of authorized person and authorized unit and authorized person from NACP, which should be in place in every organization. They should do better work regarding letting the employers know that they have these guarantees. Yeah, thank you.
James, during your presentation, or answer to my question, you mentioned mostly the moral reasons, but your research focuses on institutional practices, and here we see that the lack of awareness also within institutions might be one of the reasons why whistleblowing does not take place as effectively as it should be. So what would be your observations about the role institutional practices play for encouraging or deterring whistleblowing?
I think it's down to leadership and culture within organisations, really. And and when we're talking about moral problems, is what we believe whistleblowing tends to be. It's not a financially driven thing. It's somebody seeing something's going wrong and it strikes something with their value codes, their morals. To deal with that effectively as an organisation, and it requires leadership to be incredibly honest. And it's to recognise that within organisations, sometimes things go wrong, and being completely open and honest with the person who's bringing that forward. And what we see time and time again is that people are not able, or leaders within organisations don't feel able to hold on to that, to be able to exercise that sort of honesty, and they close ranks and they close down. And that severs that bond of trust between the individual and the organisation even further than the whistleblower, the potential whistleblower, uncovering the wrongdoing in the first place. Another thing we see is the use of language. So there's a recent case that we're dealing with in the UK that's currently going through the news, where a woman who's a care worker in a care home, which is largely unregulated in the UK, somebody who's on low pay, has uncovered incredibly, like, the most serious criminality that you can imagine with vulnerable people in a care home. And she's been described by her employer as a troublemaker, somebody who's disloyal, somebody who's just out for money. And I think we've got a responsibility as people who work in this area to be really mindful of the type of language you use. So we've talked about rewards today. We've talked about just the use of the word whistleblower in different languages. You made a quote, I'm going to hash this old one out, that Churchill said that the United Kingdom and the United States were two great cultures separated by a common language. We fall into the trap in the UK of importing American terminology or North American terminology a lot. And one of the things we've imported is this idea of rewards. When we're talking about whistleblowers and what happens, they're acting in the public good. And I was in the armed forces before I became an academic. And when I was in Afghanistan and a soldier was injured and lost a limb or whatever, they weren't rewarded for that. They were compensated for that. And the choice of language is really, really important. Because when we talk about rewards in the UK, we think of people who are acting as mercenaries. The tax authority in the UK uses the word informers to describe people who are coming forward, which traditionally in the UK has been used as criminal enforcers, people who are part of criminal gangs, being snitches. So we need to be very careful about the language we use as well, because that frames the whole debate around the moral decisions that people are making to come forward in the public interest, and we take away that entirely by being not quite as disciplined with the type of language you use.
Thank you very much. And exactly, financial incentives is what we are going to continue on. Financial rewards or compensations, the role financial incentives play vis-a-vis morality of whistleblowing. Mary, could you tell us more about those cases, and especially financial incentives in cases of human rights violations? Can we even speak about something? Because then there is no such financial pool as it is in bribes, for example.
Yes, no, I think that's a very, very important point. Like, and as I said before, like there is two different things: financial rewards and financial compensation, which is very different. I think every whistleblower who suffers damage is entitled to compensation and should receive compensation and other types of remedy, like reinstatement, for example. And that should be completely separate from whether or not there is a financial reward, and that should it's not because you have financial reward that you should not have compensation and reparation. That's very important. And that's particularly important, as you mentioned, in this framework, where what happens when you report an issue of human rights violation, for example, which might be should be seen as something maybe more important than tax fraud, for example, which in the US you get rewards to when you report that. And the issue exactly is how do you evaluate? Because normally you get maybe 10% of the funds that are being recovered by the states, but the state is not going to recover any money from, usually from addressing an issue of human rights violation. So that leaves us whistleblower completely out of the system, and that also sends a bit of a message that, well, if you blow the whistle on, financial matters, well, you matter more than if you blow the whistle on human rights violation or issue with care, like health care, and I think that's also quite problematic in itself. And maybe just to add one thing is with financial rewards, it's a very, very small percentage of whistleblowers who get one. And I think there is this also misconception that if you blow the whistle, you're going to get one if you're within the system, but that's not the case. There are very strict conditions. It's very difficult to get it. So we're talking not even 10% of those who would get it in those systems where they exist.
I would still argue that corruption cannot be really seen as separate from human rights, because it takes away the public funds, and of course we also must speak about social and economic rights, but this kind of distinction obviously creates a separation between two different forms of human rights violation, the more direct financial one and the more indirect one. So if you had to respond to this quite difficult question, do you think that the existence of financial incentives generally undermines the moral courage when we introduce them, or do you think that they are still necessary and maybe should even then be broadened to all kinds of human rights violations and all kinds of reports, and maybe even provided in more cases, not only this 1%?
I mean, that's a very interesting question. I think it's also very much linked to the culture, the national context, historical, the culture. It plays a very, very strong role into that. When I talk to some whistleblowers in various EU countries, we had this conversation when we were advocating for an EU directive. The question was, do we want to push for a reward, do we want to not? And most of the individual in EU countries were quite against it because they thought it was sending the wrong message with this. And already it's there is this issue of the perception of whistleblowers, and that would not help with that. And a lot of whistleblowers themselves say that would not be a motivator and would not have been. And a lot of whistleblowers themselves are against the idea of financial rewards in some countries. So that's quite interesting, even if they would be eligible for that. So it's really context driven, I think. And it creates a lot of issues when you look at it. Even if you were, how do you estimate a damage to a human rights violation? Who's paying that reward if it's not a percentage of the funds that have been recovered? That's also a very, there might be another party, but there might not be. How does that work? And yes, so that's a very, very interesting but complex question. Yeah.
James, what would be your response to that? Also knowing that in UK there are some discretionary payments that could be paid without any ties to even the status of whistleblowing as such.
So yeah, we have two main mechanisms. One's through the tax authority, and the other one's with the competitions and markets authority. But they can't be relied upon, A, because they're very small, and B, because the individual payments to people are very small. But also they're entirely discretionary, so there's no guarantee that you would get those. To come back to your original question, whether the money is a driver for people to come forward, I think if you can look at the numbers for the number of whistleblowing cases that are currently sat waiting for a hearing in the UK, and it's something around 20,000. And if you were to go to an employment tribunal today to bring a whistleblowing retaliation case against your employer, your hearing date would probably be around 2029. That's how long you'd be waiting for, so 4 years before you'd be get your day in court just for a preliminary hearing. So what we can take from that is that money, that's without any real mechanism to get money in the first place. These people are going through this process because there's a moral driver for doing it. Well, what I think we can say, speaking to whistleblowers, is that the lack of a financial compensation mechanism is something that discourages people from coming forward, so that bystander effect again. So you see people, even with the very famous cases we've heard about already, you can judge those as successes because they've reached to a conclusion, but also the amount of heartache and trauma that somebody's had to go through to get to the point, to go to the highest court of the land, to get that shows to the single mother on minimum wage that this is not a fight for me, and this is not a fight I can get involved in. So that would be the UK's perspective, that we do need a mechanism to compensate or restore somebody to the position they would have been had they not blown the whistle, but it's not the driver, it's not the thing that makes people come forward, it's the thing that stops people coming forward.
Natalia, you spoke a lot about the financial rewards, but what about the compensation systems? Do you think that they currently are efficient, and how easy it is to go through the whole court procedure to show the financial losses, probably also the psychological damage, moral damages, etc. at this point in time?
Yes, so there is not a lot of information on that because an ACP does not disclose those kind of information. We don't even know the exact number of court proceedings, which was based on the report of whistleblower. So, but understanding how Ukrainian judicial system works and court system works, I could say that it is difficult. And looking at the only public case, which, yes, again, I'm sorry, Oleg Polishuk, I'm sorry. He's probably have a hiccup somewhere because of me today. So yeah, he went through hell. He went, like I mentioned, all of the courts possibly he could went to. Luckily, his lawyers were, like I mentioned, also regarding the expenses and the problem with the free legal aid. His lawyers get paid only after he reached agreement with his employers, and they got paid a good amount of money, of course, but not all lawyers will agree to that. But yes, basically he showed that he's ready to fight. He had immense support from civil society because it was a big media event back then. So he understands that he has this support. If you don't want to go public, I'm not sure that you will have any actual chance right now in our judicial system, unfortunately, because, yeah, like I mentioned, he was only able to win on the last, cassation courts. The first two courts, they agreed with his employers, which is ridiculous, honestly. So, unfortunately, yeah, we need to reform our judicial system, and that's also our priority for European integration, and certain steps already been taken, and yeah, they are stipulated in our other documents with EU. So yeah.
It must be noted that Ukraine is not the only country or not the only territory where you have to go through the whole 3 levels of courts in order to get your justice. We can see that even in front of the European Court of Human Rights, sometimes you have to get to the final instance, the grand panel, to be recognized as a whistleblower and to receive your protection. But you both, James and Natalia, mentioned also the psychological impact of the whistleblowing and how important it is to be supported by the society. But of course, that's not always possible because of the inherently lonely endeavor of whistleblowing. So, Maria, could you please tell more about the psychological support which you have observed in different European countries? Do you see that in some countries it might be sufficient, that there are still some gaps? And what do we think about psychological support exactly to the more vulnerable groups and to families which experience the retaliation, probably even children?
Yes, thank you. I mean, I think the short answer is there are really, in the end, no countries who are doing or getting or there. I would say, I mean, in the European directive, financial and psychological support is not mandatory. It was optional for member states to decide whether or not they want to provide this, and very few of them actually decided to do that. And when they do, it's a very small program. It's mostly piloting at this stage. So there is like limited information. I mean, like in Greece, for example, they like according to the law, they are working with the order of therapists who are supposed to give a list of like pro bono therapists to provide the psychological support, but it's very unclear on whether or not it's actually used or if it's really there in practice. There are a number of CSOs who are also trying to fill the gap, trying to do that, like provide vouchers, for example, to go to therapists. What's quite important is that therapists actually need to be trained to understand what whistleblowing is about, because very few actually do, and they don't necessarily understand what the whistleblower is going through, like the type of hardship. In many cases, whistleblower gets PTSD, for example. But it's not always very understood. So that's an important aspect. And yes, so very few countries are doing this, so it's on a very, very small scale. I know that I think the Dutch authority, like whistleblowing authority, also started a pilot program, but it's very nascent at this point. And I think that's a very key, important element to actually make it work. And it is like particularly important for vulnerable group who might not have access to this privately because they don't have the financial means, or they have more difficulty accessing it, and families. I think that's a very key point because the emotional toll on families of whistleblowers is very underestimated, but there are a lot of studies that show that the percentage of divorce is actually quite high, like in whistleblower cases, and of course children already from divorce or other tension in the house will suffer. So this support should be extended to the family, but we don't even have it properly for whistleblower at this point. So, and yeah.
Would you have anything to add regarding UK, James?
Yeah. So I think there's our position really is to move away, or certainly Whistleblowers UK, is to move away from pathologizing the consequences of whistleblowing. In the same way that one would want to avoid pathologizing a grief process that somebody has gone through. Therapy or psychotherapy is usually looking at ways people are misappreciating a set of circumstances that happened. But what we're talking about really with whistleblowing, what we find with our the cases that we look after, is that we're talking about what's called moral injury. We're talking about the definitions that you're observing, perpetrating, or failing to prevent acts that transgress deeply held moral beliefs and expectations, or the betrayal of what's right by somebody holding legitimate authority in a high-stakes situation. Now, when that happens, the emotions associated with that are generally guilt, their shame, or their anger. They're not fear, which is traditionally what PTSD is about. And you can't therapy a moral reaction away from something. If something wrong has happened and it strikes your moral values, it's not a therapy reaction. It's more of a spiritual thing, really, if anything. So to echo what you were saying, you can't, it's very difficult to find psychologists who are trained or understand that moral process. And the research in that is really traditionally in the armed forces when you're looking at acts that happen in warfare. And that's only recently been looked at in different areas. So what we're leaning more towards in the UK with Whistleblowers UK is peer-led group support, where people who've been through similar situations, who who've come out the other end of it, usually, can lend support and a moral authority and that moral handrail for people. Because what happens generally is that we all have, it's called the cognitive triad, we all have these assumptions that we make about the world, about other people in it, about ourselves. And when these actions happen, it breaks those assumptions. So you need a moral handrail to help you make sense and incorporate what's happened to you into your moral framework. So it's very difficult to do that with people in white coats in a clinical setting. We're talking about more socially, we're speaking spiritually, even if I dare say that here. So we find with Whistleblowers UK, we need peer-led group support to do that and to sort of have moral authorities within that, because it's not just the whistleblowing, it's not just the retaliation, but in the UK certainly it's also going through the legal process where you expect the judiciary to act in your best interests, that you'll have your day in court, and as I just mentioned, people are waiting 4 years just to get to that stage. And in the UK, whistleblowing is an employment matter. The tribunals do not look into the wrongdoing that you raise a concern about in the first place. They're only really interested in the very niche, the sort of very technical aspects of are you a whistleblower or not, and a causation, a link between you doing that and you being fired or any detriment. And the causation thing specifically is very difficult to prove. So if you're a whistleblower and you're going through this and you feel like you've done the right thing, just going through that process in itself is a moral betrayal, a source of moral injury. So, like I say, peer-led group support by people who've experienced this, who've been through it, who can help people make sense and integrate those experiences into a new worldview.
Thank you very much. And before we turn to the questions from the audience, I would like to still ask you, what other gaps do you see in the response system to the cost of whistleblowing? We have just identified that there needs to be some continuation of education of judges and lawyers in general. The same applies to the therapist. But is there anything else where you already would know that response is needed exactly to help whistleblowers to tackle the cost of their action, but which hasn't been mentioned yet? So could we start maybe with Natalia?
Yes, thank you. It's hard to think of anything else, honestly, that I haven't covered yet already. But yeah, I think for sure the system should be align with the best practices in Ukraine right now, because you can, if you get this cultural shift and people start to actually trust the system and actually will to act, but the system then proves that it is cannot meet their expectation, this will be extremely detrimental. I'm again saying in Ukraine we are in a wartime. And the absence of actual channels, safe channels for military personnel to report is extremely, extremely bad. This should be our #1 priority. This is a matter of life and death. And yeah, this is basically, I think, this is the crucial matter. Thank you.
Mary?
Yeah, I think, well, there is a lot of issues to be tackled, but I would say maybe one of the major one is this issue of support and like the access to justice aspect, because I mean, in many countries it is an issue already. You will wait for 4 years before you're day in court on this matter and other matters as well. So that's an issue, and the financial cost of this, because you've lost your job. Plus, you have to pay for your lawyer. In some countries, you have to pay to actually get to court. So that's quite problematic. I mean, there is an interesting example in France where the judge can actually order the more wealthy party to provide financial support to the other and like to pay for the legal costs. So that's at the beginning, and of course, eventually they might have to reimburse if it's found differently. But this way, usually the whistleblower, being the weaker party, will receive some financial support. I mean, it's very new, it's in the new law. We'll have to see how it's actually implemented, but I think it's an interesting mechanism, and it's also an interesting preventative mechanism, because like often, like when we go, like the organization goes to court, it's because they think they're gonna already like win by doing that, because the whistleblower just can't follow. So maybe something to keep there. And like other type of supports, like help to care for family, for example, could be something. I mean, in some contexts when when like the person blowing the whistle is also in charge of care for maybe sick people, dependent people, elderly, that becomes a problem. And I think those networks needs to happen more, but like often they're kind of self-built support network. I mean, in the US there is the Whistleblowers of America, where they actually created this CSO, and it's really just for that. But I think, yeah, and there needs to be more, and there needs to be more done by the government and the authority, because unfortunately, very often this gap is filled by civil society organizations who do not have the funds to do this, so it's very limited as well.
Thank you. And James, what would you add on this?
In the UK context, the thing we really need is an independent office for whistleblowers that sits above any department. It's not in the business department at the moment. Whistleblowing law is very much an employment law matter. It doesn't sit in health. It sits across everything. It's not a corruption matter. So we're pushing for that as an organisation, and have been doing for a number of years. But the big thing we have really is maintaining media awareness. So we've had a number of high-profile cases in the UK, and the media spotlight is shone on them for a period of time, and then we move on. And everybody abhors what's happened. We've had doctors in a neonatal or paediatric unit who were raising concerns about a nurse, who were forced in writing to apologise to that nurse, who then eventually went to court, and she was awarded 15 whole life terms for murdering babies. That is not an employment law matter, and it focuses the attention. But what we really need, and what's quite difficult, is to maintain the relationships with media organisations to keep the pressure on government to recognise this as an ongoing problem. The public's with us, but what's difficult to maintain is the pressure on government, who know that the news cycle is going to move on very, very quickly. So that's on I agree with everything else that's been said, but that's probably the main thing I'd add.
Thank you very much, our dear panelists. So now we open the floor for discussions. So are there any questions from the audience, please?
Yeah, so I will just say something general, so I'll just turn like this. I introduced myself already earlier. I'm Ines Kušķi from the State Chancellery, the contact point of whistleblowers in Latvia. And I wanted to complement this discussion with other issues, to my view, related to the courage and the cost of whistleblowers' courage, and probably the price of putting in practice this courage. So I think as part of this project where we have this conference, we also conducted two big reports. One was done by us, the State Chancellery. Outside this project, the ex-post evaluation of our whistleblowing system in Latvia, and then a report by Delna, which is independent assessment of the system. And there is also the opinion pool, which actually on this topic provided interesting perspective. Of course, retaliation is very important, and it is important to think about what happens next. But actually, asking about the readiness to report, the first answer is, first of all, the first answer is yes, I would report. I think 43% of people were ready to do that. And the second was, no, I will not report because I don't think that will change something. And then the third answer is, I will not report because I may have retaliation or some consequences to me. And then asking about what kind of help you would like to have if you are retaliated, the first answer was legal help. So people mostly saw that the trouble is how to legally, go through the process of court, with actually what should I do first place, etc. So these are the two things that I wanted to add to this discussion. And in our assessment, we talk about the state provided legal aid, which is one of the protection guarantees in Latvia. And our system started to operate in 2019, and the assessment is until 2023. So more or less 5 years. And in total, there were 17 cases where such state-granted legal aid was provided to whistleblowers in Latvia. We don't have psychological aid, and in our study we discussed this matter as well as rewards. But yeah, so I wanted to add these few points to our discussion and to also advertise these two big reports that are available. The assessment by the State Chancellery is only available in Latvian, but the Delna independent assessment is also available in English.
And maybe I can add a bit more. This assessment, what Ines was talking about, this independent assessment done by Delna, it's available also today. You can take these publications with you. And also maybe something about this psychological support. Delna has its whistleblower center maybe for 20 or even more years. During these years, we have collected different reports from whistleblowers or people who are informing us, but they are not whistleblowers, just about different cases. And in last years, we also have received like reports and whistleblowers or informers just approach us, and we see that they more are asking not only about this legal aid, which is also very important for them, and one of the first things they're asking, but they are also shifting and thinking about that they need also some psychological help. Because the number is like, I don't know, a few people, but we see that these discussions in society next year can be very actual, because people are starting to think about also this psychological support, because there is things that when person becomes a whistleblower, he contacts that responsible authority, he works with that authority, and in that process he is very lonely. He needs just someone who gives him not only the lawyer's advice, what you need to do, what paper you need to submit on, but also needs someone who stays next to him and just give warm support when the situation is asking. That's what we see, but we see that it's only something what's going to be in discussions in the next years. But yes, at the moment, yes, there is this legal support, but we suppose that next years we will come up with these discussions, because it could be like a next level for the whistleblowing system development in Latvia. I think also in very many countries, because as also you mentioned, it's getting, I can't say popular, but people start to think about it more and more and more, because they need some years to get what means whistleblower system, and after some years they start to understand what could be improved. Maybe this was a comment from my side about related also not only with our report, but more with our experience in our whistleblowing center. Maybe one more, other questions? Okay.
Hello, British are back. This whole idea of rewarding whistleblowers, I believe, sets us down a very difficult track, because most people don't know they're a whistleblower when they first become whistleblowers. And that, in looking at the way that some of the programs are set out, take the US one, where I know everyone is sort of looking at it optimistically, and for anyone who needs a bit of a fact sheet, I brought one with me. How does the panel think that a whistleblower will fairly engage in a process which has traditionally been very much aimed in the area of bribery and corruption, money laundering, where there's an easier target to recover, versus as Europeans, we all have an integrated health system, we have state benefits. How do we move from looking at a North American program to developing something which is much more about how Europeans work? And believe it or not, I still think we're European.
So question to?
So that's a question to the panel, but maybe I would invite Marie to start, as she is knowledgeable about the implementation of EU directives. So exactly about European unique approaches.
Yeah, I think like the point you're making, that many whistleblowers actually do not know they're whistleblowers until they suffer retaliation. And they don't necessarily know of like all the supports that exist. And And I think one of the numbers that was actually also one of the barrier for blowing the whistle is not knowing where or how. And so there is also a lot of work to be done in awareness raising. I think in terms of like all this support, like differently from the reward system, but from the state, yes, like we have a social system and there is a healthcare and all of that, but it doesn't necessarily take into account the particular circumstances of cases. For example, in many countries, you will have unemployment benefit, but that's only if you get dismissed. One of the very used way of retaliating against a whistleblower is to harass them until they leave. So they just leave the organization, and then they're not entitled to any unemployment benefits, for example. And in many countries, there is generally the issue of not enough therapists to just actually get there. But those are wider issues than when it comes to whistleblowing. So it is a very, very difficult issue. I think one of the things to stress is that in any cases, it's very important for whistleblowers to seek advice before they blow the whistle, and that's why it's very important to do a bit more of awareness about what is whistleblowing so that they can identify as whistleblowers. And there needs to be more advice to whistleblowers before they blow the whistle so that they can do it safely. And so to avoid to the maximum retaliation, but also to present the facts and the report, to help them present this in the way that there is more chances of it being addressed and being taken seriously. And so then the wrongdoing is being addressed, because that's one of the, as was mentioned earlier, one of the main reasons why people do not report, because they don't see the point, because it's not going to change anything, and then why take risks in that case. So I think those are important points.
Yeah, I would like to add that, as I showed in my presentation, we do have this unified portal for whistleblowing reports. And as you could have seen, the number of reports which are received by NACP is almost like 8,000 reports, and half of it has been protest, and only a small amount is classified as a whistleblower report. That's why it's so important to have such technical mechanisms that people could send information. It will get estimated by professionals, and then they will get the legal advice, the help with navigating, and they will understand whether they are whistleblowers or not whistleblowers, because according to that statistic, it seems like a lot of people who just want to vent about something, they write reports to an ACP portal. And so, yes, but also what is really important is the involvement of a competent body like an ACP, including in the court proceeding, because, yeah, that, like I answered to before, the question before, the involvement help person navigate through all the regulations, through all the demands, through what he could face if he wants to pursue this. Yeah, so I think that's really important when you think about it, yeah.
Thank you. Just a comment on the US system. In the UK in particular, we seem to valorize that system and put it on a pedestal. But what we found is that it lends itself, or it leans more towards the cases that come with a higher value reward. You're more likely to get more money out of the organisation that's done the wrongdoing, or the simpler cases, so the less complicated cases. So what you find then is that the lower value cases, or the cases that are more complicated, take more resource to investigate, are left alone. So it's not it's better than the system we have in the UK, but it's not a panacea, it's not perfect. So that would be the only thing I would add about the US system.
So we have time for one more question from the audience, and I see that we found it already.
So one point about the US system, the reward system, is that usually these cases are settled, and then the whistleblower is basically they need to shut up for the rest of their life about what was going on. And I don't think that's something we should replicate in Europe. What do you feel about that?
Well, my chief executive sat behind you and she was clapping, so the answer to that is we agree that shouldn't be something that continues. I think it's important that not only that justice has been done, but justice has been seen to be done as well. I've mentioned the bystander effect about 1 million times, so I'll mention it one more for good luck. We need to make sure that people see the consequences for people who retaliate. And we have a lot of UK people. The majority of Europeans who use the US system are Brits, who are involved in that system to get money out of it, who are getting rewards from it. But certainly NDAs are a cancer on making sure wrongdoing is brought to light and people held accountable.
Do you have anything to add? So then we still have time for one more question, if there is any.
I think there is no one question, but maybe I can continue with thank you for the moderation of this discussion, I think, and maybe some last inspiring words.
All right, so if I was given those 6 minutes until the end, I would still like to delve deeper into the later reintegration of whistleblowers into the labor market, which is the topic which we did not really discuss, because that's yet another aspect of cost of whistleblowers that later, especially if their identity is known, they might be seen also by other employers as maybe unreliable, untrustworthy, and probably they themselves, again, have this psychological toll. So if there is 1 minute reflection you could have on this topic before I summarize all of our conclusions, please feel free to speak up.
Very quickly, it's a good thing to have, but again, it's not a panacea. So if you're going through a court process, one of the ways that an employer might undermine you is to make false claims against you or bring up psychological things to undermine you, to discredit what you're trying to say. So anonymity going through the court process helps a whistleblower. It's one of those things that discourages somebody coming forward. But again, it's not a panacea. A lot of the cases we find are in very niche professions where people are very specialized. So regardless of whether you have a media anonymity or a judicial anonymity, people within your profession know. So the answer isn't anonymity to prevent retaliation. The answer is consequences and accountability for those who do.
Yeah, I think, I mean, like, of course, like, confidentiality is key in general in all, like, whistleblowing cases. And, like, the company or the public institution is supposed to keep the confidentiality of the whistleblower. It's actually in the EU directive, like states are meant to implement sanctions for those who breach this duty of confidentiality. So I think that's very important, because then that can help the whistleblower then find another employment if their name hasn't been there. But of course, I mean, if the organization wants to retaliate, they will find a way to actually, you know, spread the word. I mean, though, you know, like the way a new employer is going to ask for references. And then there is a way to provide references that clearly says that, you know, do not hire this person, like not necessarily going into the detail of they blow the whistle. I think an interesting initiative that was done by TIA Slovakia is like they had created a network of organizations who will be like willing to hire whistleblowers, so like self-name like that. So maybe something to explore as well in other countries.
Yeah, I would just like to add, I totally agree with what my colleague said, but at the end of the day, it's again the matter of the cultural shift toward respecting whistleblowers. Do not see them as untrustworthy persons, but see them as person who is brave and who is doing their civic duty basically by whistleblowing. So I believe that that's the main problem, that we should shift this cultural perception of whistleblowers among employers as well. Not only people like Ukrainians definitely support and business support, but would you hire a person like that? You know, supporting is one thing and hiring is another. So yeah, that would be it. Thank you.
So to summarize this hour-long discussion, we found that the cost of whistleblowers' courage is quite high. It impacts the whistleblowers in all of the aspects, starting from their physical well-being, family life, of course, the employment, future, and also financially. But I think a thread which we saw weaving throughout the conversation was the resilience of the society, that the society can get helpful in a lot of different ways, starting from educated psychological networks, educated lawyers, employers which are interested in employing the previous whistleblowers. All of us as a society thus have the duty to educate ourselves, support the whistleblowers, internalize the knowledge that we could also be whistleblowers and we should be whistleblowers in cases we see some wrongdoing, and require the governments and lawmakers to strengthen the existing and in some moments the still lacking legal networks by ensuring that there are all the tools for whistleblowers to use to blow the whistle in all of the different fields of employment. Thank you very much.
Thanks you, Madre, for moderation and for enlightening these important topics, what is about these rewarding and compensations and supports which can help whistleblowers to blow the whistle and encourage them. But I think we also need to take one pause because in our schedule there are one lunch. And I would like to ask my colleague Jacobs, who is staying next to doors, like show you the right directions to the place where the lunch is served. So the Jacobs will be your light, who will show really the right directions because it's on the first floor. So Jacob, please show how to find the lunch place. And then we are back here at 1:30 to start our next presentations and discussions.
Got a fast car. I want a ticket to anywhere. Maybe we can make a deal. Maybe together we can go somewhere. Any place is better. Starting from zero, got nothing to lose. Maybe we'll make something. Me, myself, I got nothing to prove. You got a fast car. I got a plan to get us out of here. Been working at the convenience store. Managed to save just a little bit of money. Won't have to drive too far. Let's cross the border and into the city. You and I can both get jobs and finally see what it means to be living. So I remember when we were driving in your car. Speed so fast it felt like I was drunk. The city lights lay out before cruise and entertain ourselves. You still ain't got a job. And now working the market as a checkout girl. I know things will get better. You'll find work and I'll get promoted. We'll move out of the shelter. Buy a bigger house and live in the suburbs. So I remember when we were driving in your car. Speed so fast it felt like I was drunk. City lights lay out before us, and your arm felt nice wrapped around my shoulder. I had a feeling that I belonged. I had a feeling I could be someone, be someone, be someone. You got a fast car, the fast enough so you can fly away. You gotta make a decision. Leave tonight or live with her this way.
For your love. When I think about those nights in Montreal, I get the sweetest thoughts of you and me. Memories of love above the city lights. Ooh, I try so hard to take it, but oh Lord, my heart would make it. I just wanna stop and say what I feel about you, babe. I just wanna stop and never wanna leave without you, babe. I just gotta stop for your love. never saw the tears in my eyes. She held our world in her hand. She left through my finger and blew away like dust. No matter how hard I tried, kept it tight as I could. Could have made more money, could have taken more time. These are the things I think about when I'm left with my mind. And my friends say I gotta face it, to let go, but I can't. Now she has a baby, she has a life. I had her heart, now someone else's wife. Could have made more money, could have taken more time. These are the things I think about when I'm left with my mind. And my friends say I gotta face it, to let go, but I can't. Now she has a baby. My love, only for you. Again, my love, I've given me hope, and I know it's only you, encased in silence. Leah, how long will you still want me to want you, in and around you? Leah, my concertina, will you still want me to want you? Here's to the you who dare, my love. Only with you I share my love. I've given it thought, and it's not all that appears. Who cares what the cynic says? I care cross for you. Oh, what a thing to do. 'Cause you were all yellow. I drew a line. I drew a line for you. Oh, what a thing to do. And it was all yellow. Your skin, oh yeah, your skin and bones turned into something beautiful. And you know, for you I bleed myself dry. For you I bleed myself dry. It's true. Look how they shine on you. Look how they shine on you. Yeah. Look how they shine on you. Look at the stars. Look how they shine on you. And all the things you do. Traveling and afraid I'll come back on a hippie trailhead full of zombies. I met a strange lady, she made me nervous. She took me in and gave me breakfast. And she said, do you come from a land down under, where women glow and plunder? Can't you hear the thunder? You better run, you better take cover. Buying bread from a man in Brussels. He was 6'4" and full of muscle. I said, do you speak in my language? He just smiled and gave me Vegemite sandwich. And he said, do you come from a land down under, where women glow and plunder? Can't you hear the thunder? You better run, you better take cover. Lying down in Bombay, with his life job and not much to say. I said to the man, "Are you trying to tempt me? Because I come from the land of plenty." He said, "Do you come from a land down under, where women glow and plunder? Can't you hear the thunder? You better run, you better take cover. Do you come from a land down under, where women glow and plunder? Can't you hear the thunder? You better run, you better take cover." Take your baby by the hand and make her do high handstand.
guess what? So is my money. All I want to do for me is to give it to me when you get home. R-E-S-P-E-C-T, find out what it means to me. R-E-S-P-E-C-T, take care, TBC. Suck it to me, suck it to me, suck it to me, suck it to me, suck it to me.
Every move you make, every bound you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you. Every single day, every word you say, every game you play, every night you stay, I'll be watching you. Oh, can you see you belong to me? How my poor heart aches with every step you take, every move you make, every bow you break, every smile you fake, every claim you stake, I've been watching you. Since you've gone, I've been lost without a trace. I dream at night, I could only see your face. I look around, but it's you I can't replace. I feel so cold and I long for your embrace. I keep crying, baby, baby, please. Oh, can't you see you belong to me? How my poor heart aches with every step you take, every move you make, every bow you break, every smile you fake, every claim you stake, I've been watching you. Every smile you fake, every claim you stake, I've been watching you. Every smile you fake, every claim you stake, I've been watching you. Every smile you fake, every claim every time I think of you. I always catch my breath, and I'm still standing here, and you're miles away, and I'm wondering why you left. And there's a storm that's raging through my frozen heart tonight. I hear your name in certain circles, and it always makes me smile. I spend my time thinking about you, and it's almost driving me wild. And it's my heart that's breaking down this long distance line tonight. I ain't missing you at all. Since you've been gone away, I ain't missing you. No matter what my friends say, there's a message in the wire, and I'm sending you this signal tonight. You don't know how desperate I've become, and it looks like I'm losing this fight. And it's my heart that's breaking down this long distance line tonight. I ain't missing you at all. Since you've been gone away, I ain't missing you. No matter what I might say. And there's a message that I'm sending out, like a telegraph to your soul. And if I can't reach this distance, stop this heartbreak overload, I ain't missing you at all. Since you've been gone away, I ain't missing you. No matter what I might say, I ain't is my own design. It is my own remorse. Help me to decide. Help me find a most of freedom and of pleasure. Nothing ever lasts forever. Everybody wants to rule the world. There's a room where the light won't find.
Test 1, test 1.
Holding hands while the world keeps tumbling down. When they do, I'll be right behind you. So glad we've almost made it. So sad we had to fade it. Everybody wants to rule the world. I can't stand this indecision, married with a lack of vision. Everybody wants to rule the world. Say that you never needed one headline. Why believe it? Everybody wants
Test.
to rule the world.
Test.
Welcome to
Check.
your life.
Check.
Come on, baby, dry your eyes, wipe your tears. I never like to see you cry. Won't you please forgive me?
I would've never tried to hurt
Hey.
you. I just needed someone to hold me, to fill the void while you were gone, to fill the space of emptiness.
I'm only human, of flesh and blood, I'm human, born to make mistakes.
So many nights I long to hold you. So many times I looked and saw your face. Nothing could change the way I feel.
No one else could ever take your place. I'm only human, of flesh and blood, I'm human, born to make mistakes.
The tears I cry aren't tears of pain. They're only to hide my guilt and shame. I forgive you. Now I ask the same of you. While we were apart, I was human too.
Recording. Test. Test. Check. Check.
Check.
Check. Check.
Check, check.
Check. Check.
Recording stopped. Recording in progress.